mysterious objects. They didn't know what they were, but they thought they looked ancient.
Marinatos was intrigued. This was the perfect position for a port city, right on the coast. So gathering together a team, he started to investigate here. He had no idea how deep they'd have to dig. The volcanic ash and rock is 30 meters high in some places on the island. But, remarkably, on the very first day, they made a breakthrough.
They were digging through stuff just like this here, and he was ecstatic when about 4 meters down he started to make out the shape of pots, and his expert eye, they were clearly storage jars. And storage jars that looked to be exactly the same type and date as the ones he was so familiar with from Knossos in Crete. But that was nothing, because a few days later, he would discover an entire buried city.
He called it Akrotiri.
Wow.
Over the next 7 years, the archaeologists feverishly excavated. Wall after wall, room after room, and building after building slowly began to appear from beneath the 3,500-year-old ash and rubble. And as they dug, they began to reveal striking similarities with the story of Atlantis. Located by the sea, it was almost certainly a port city. With its impressive multi-story buildings, Akrotiri had clearly been wealthy, just like Atlantis. And as more and more of the ancient city surfaced from the ash, the similarities grew even stronger.
So what are we looking at here?
So this is one of the main streets of the town, and you've got houses on either side. You can just see the remains of the walls. Then a main street that would have been paved with beautiful flagstones. And then the most remarkable thing, I think, underneath it, you've got a drainage system.
Like that gutter there?
That gutter, yes, that humble gutter is actually a mark of extremely high civilization.
Amazing.
There's flushing lavatory systems, and that would have all gone into that and flushed it out into the sea.
I mean, that wasn't normal at the time, presumably.
No, that is highly sophisticated. There's not many cultures have got that level of water engineering in their states at this time. And these people have got it down so well.
And that, I guess, allows everyone to live together in this crowded way without getting terrible diseases.
It's going to help. One of the reasons that people have drawn parallels between here and Plato's Atlantis is precisely this facility with water engineering. Because the Atlanteans are kind of the ultimate water engineers. They create bathhouses with both cold and hot, not just for their elite classes, but for the rest of the population, and indeed not just for the human population, but for the horses, the beasts of burden, and the animals. So we have cleanliness pervading Atlantis.
So in Plato's Atlantis, even the animals are clean.
They are.
So for Plato and the ancient Greeks, water management, that said, you're an advanced civilization.
It does indeed, yeah.
And they're doing it here.
They're doing it right here.
After digging up Akrotiri, Marinatos was now convinced that his theory was right. The combination of Knossos Palace on Crete and this port city was inspiration for Atlantis. It was like Atlantis itself had been found in stone. You no longer had to imagine it. You could walk through the streets and almost sense the people that had once lived here. Today, many of Akrotiri's finest treasures lie in Santorini's archaeological museum in the town of Thera. Each one gives a fascinating insight into that lost world and the parallels with the story of Atlantis.
I love these murals. This was painted onto the wall of one of the grandest houses in Akrotiri, and it's such a special thing to have an image of their world painted by the people who actually lived in it. Look at this wonderful island here. It's lush You've got fantastic detail. It's like trees, deer, perhaps a lion up there. And then, my favourite bit, this armada of ships and boats heading out across the sea. Some of them under oar, some of them sail-powered, some of them look ceremonial, like it's almost a kind of festival experience. Dolphins all around them, and they're arriving in somewhere that I think looks quite like Santorini. Barren, red cliffs, a sense of the volcanic, with coloured buildings, people greeting them. This is a wealthy maritime world, a world of colour and vibrancy. Could this settlement at the end here actually be Akrotiri? Was this what it looked like before it was destroyed in that volcano? The other thing that really strikes me when you look at this, you look at the animals, the richness of the colours, the buildings, the ships. If you did want a picture of Plato's Atlantis, this is pretty much it.
Marinatos had discovered that, like the Atlanteans, who ruled over several islands, the real-life Minoans flourished both here and on Crete. The Minoans, too, were clearly a massive sea power with connections as far away as Egypt. And they suffered an epic natural disaster. The idea that these places were the inspiration for Plato's Atlantis is compelling.
The problem I have with it is it took place over 1,000 years before Plato was writing. And we've got absolutely no evidence that Plato had ever heard about it. In fact, there is no account, no mention of the destruction of Akrotiri in any ancient source at all. Possibly we've lost those sources over the years, and possibly it was such an enormous event that it was just talked about, handed down from parent to child over the generations.
So despite all the incredible similarities with Atlantis, I'm going to continue my search. And luckily, there is another contender. Through an incredible piece of detective work, archaeologists have just discovered another lost city on the coast of mainland Greece. Perhaps the inspiration for Atlantis lies closer to Plato's home of Athens and much closer to Plato's time. Greece, nearly 2,500 years ago. News of a terrible natural disaster reached the city of Athens.
About 100 miles away, along the coast, a huge tsunami smashed into the shoreline. A once bustling, vibrant port now lay beneath the waves.
The devastated city was called Helike, and intriguingly its destruction occurred just 13 years before Plato wrote about Atlantis.
There are some very interesting parallels. For example, people in Greece at the time said that the population of Helike must have somehow enraged the sea god Poseidon, and he was the one who destroyed the town. Well, in the same way, Plato's Atlantis is smashed by a vengeful god. Interesting coincidence.
A vanished city destroyed by a tsunami in Plato's lifetime certainly seems like a good candidate as the inspiration for Atlantis. The problem was that for centuries it was impossible to explore the connection because Helike had vanished without a trace. Apart from a few ancient stories, there was no evidence that the city had ever existed at all. But just 35 years ago, archaeologists began to hunt, and all that would change.
Their search would turn out to be one of the most brilliant pieces of archaeological detective work I have ever come across. Just heading up the coast now, following the footsteps of those brilliant archaeologists, and I cannot wait to see what they uncover.
At first, the archaeologists only had a very rough idea where to look for the ancient city of Helike, 100 miles west of Athens on the coast. Once they arrived, they began to scour every inch of the seabed around the shore using sonar equipment, hunting for the city. After 3 years, they had found absolutely nothing.
Not one ruined building, not one piece of pottery.
But they didn't give up hope. Instead, they did something surprising. They began to look inland.
Well, that might sound like they're swapping their search from a drop in the ocean to a needle in a haystack, but the archaeologists had a theory. What if the old coastline was actually inland from where the modern beach is? That would mean Henrique wasn't underwater, it was underground.
The archaeologists began looking back at the ancient stories to see if there could be anything in this theory. They concluded that in their previous hunts, something had been lost in translation. Henrique wasn't buried under the sea, but lost under an inland lagoon. And they had some useful clues. The ancient records named a few places which archaeologists hoped might help them pinpoint its location.
Come a mile or two in from the coast now, and apparently one of the key landmarks was hidden in these cliffs above me now.
One of the stories referred to a magical cave high up in the mountains.
This was the Cave of Heracles.
Roma.
You may know him by his Roman name. Hercules, who's the half-man, half-god who performed the 12 labours. While the ancient Greeks would climb up to the cave, they'd kneel down before a statue of Heracles just in there. They'd roll some dice, and the statue would apparently tell their fortunes for them. It still feels like a bit of adventure coming up here today. But more recently, this cave was also the vital piece of evidence that helps archaeologists fix the position of the ancient city of Henrique.
In ancient times, a geographer visited here and significantly wrote down a detailed description of the area.
He mentions this cave, he mentions the ruins of Henrique, which you can still see in the shallows, and he mentions the town of Egio, which is still in existence today. And that allows archaeologists to piece together what this coastline might have looked like 2,500 years ago. Here's the coast, here's the sea. We know he mentions the cave here, and he mentions the town of Egio, still in existence on the coast today. Now, he says that Egio was 4.5 miles from the ruins of Henrique, and he says that the cave was 3 miles from the ruins of Henrique, which means Henrique should be round about here. X marks the spot. That is where they need to start looking.
January 2000. On the Greek coast, 100 miles west of Athens, the atmosphere was buzzing. After decades of searching, archaeologists had finally targeted a location for the lost city of Henrique. They'd always wondered whether Henrique was inspiration for Atlantis. Now, at last, they had a chance to find out.
It wasn't the easiest place to dig. As you can see, the countryside is packed with dense olive groves. And once they cleared these trees away, they dug into the ground and found water quite close to the surface. The water table was very high. All of it just made digging a difficult process.
They nervously dug through the waterlogged soil, and it gradually became clear that something was buried here beneath the ground. Little by little, stone blocks emerged, forming the outline of walls. Pebbled floors slowly came into view, and there were enormous storage shafts dotted across the site. They realized that, amazingly, the lost city of Henrique had been beautifully preserved beneath the soil after thousands of years. The archaeologists leading the hunt for the lost city was Dora Katsinopoulou.
So Dora, what are we looking at here?
We are walking through a major building complex. Here was a thriving industry of textile. They were making textile, they were selling textile, lots of products going in and out, lots of coins found here showing exchange with many cities around Greece, a very rich place.
This ancient factory is just one of the many pockets that have been found so far. The evidence already shows that over 2,000 years this city grew to be huge, rich, and powerful. Just like Atlantis. And the evidence also suggests that this once glorious place was destroyed in exactly the same way as Plato's Atlantis, starting with a massive earthquake.
About 600 meters east from this building, we have found in one of our excavations the ruins of a classical building that was destroyed by this earthquake of 373 BC, and actually the way the walls are destroyed shows that there we have a tsunami action.
Wow, so you can tell from the archaeology that the buildings were knocked over by a tsunami.
Yes, exactly.
Atlantis and Elike had shared exactly the same fate. And as evidence surfaced from beneath the ground, Dora dug further into the ancient records about Elike, where she discovered another incredible connection. Just like Atlantis in Plato's story, Elike had been a bustling port. On the night of the catastrophe, it was harboring a whole fleet of Spartan warships. Extraordinarily, the admiral of this fleet was Plato's most bitter enemy.
We found, by looking again into the ancient sources, that Plato had also a personal interest in the Elike destruction. Plato was traveling a lot, and in one of his travels, he was captured. And so the person tried to sell Plato into slavery.
Come on.
And here in Elike, the night of
Seriously, you
the
wanna
earthquake,
shot
there
me?
were at anchor here in Elike's port ten Spartan ships. Their admiral was called Polis. This Spartan admiral was the person that years ago had tried to sell him into slavery, and he got drowned here.
No.
Oh yes,
So we know that this destruction would have had a big impact
yes,
personally
yes,
on
on
Plato.
Plato, yes.
Cool.
Out of all the places I've visited on my hunt for Atlantis, Elike really does seem to tick the boxes as a real candidate for the inspiration of the Plato story. The destruction of Elike didn't just occur within Plato's lifetime, but it had killed off his arch enemy.
I would love to go back to the Agora here in Plato's time, grab him by the shoulders and ask him what his inspirations were. Was it Pericles or Akrotiri or Crete or one of the other places I've been to? Or was it all just a product of his own imagination?
In my mind, when Plato was conjuring up his fabulous story of Atlantis, with its glittering palaces, bustling ports, and its terrible destruction, the chances are that he was picking and mixing from all the extraordinary places that he's seen.
And would you be amazed to discover that 2,500 years later, people are still fascinated by the Atlantis story? It's contributed to archaeologists making remarkable discoveries. And will that interest in Atlantis continue? And will it drive us to discover yet more ancient ruins beneath the waves?
Den här bilden fick jag utav Helga Henschel när vi var på en turné i Västerbottens inland i Söndag författarcentrum. Och senare när min dotter skulle födas så fick jag en idé om att skriva en visa på det här temat. Den visan är alltså 46 år gammal och heter Kajsastina 9 år. En miljövisa, tidig sådan.
När jag blir stor finns fåglarna kvar då jord. Finns fåglarna kvar när jag blir stor. Och där vi bor ska blommorna blomma, säg vad du tror. Kan man bada i vår sjö, vandra barfot på vår ö. Tror du sommaren kommer igen? Jag vet det ej, vännen min, men jag litar på dig, vännen min. Och jag hoppas och tror när det blir stor att solen lyser som förr, att inte fåglarna dör, att blommor blommar var vår, att gräset är grönt där du går, att ni som är stora då tillsammans ska ordna så att jorden får upp och nytt lever upp. En stjärna, en sol, en fjäril, en ros, en vind som är fri. Det är så det ska bli. En stjärna, en sol, en fjäril, en ros, en vind som är fri. Det är så det ska bli.
Fick Sverige näringsfrihet. Nu fick alla som ville starta egna företag. Företagen byggde man själv med platta paket. De kom från postordercentralen i Dalarna. Allt gick att sälja med mördande reklam. Konsumentsverige växte fram och vi fick bankomaten, mobiltelefonen och tetrapack. Men till slut uppfanns internet och vi blev alla sociala igen. Titta, där är en träbaron.
Konflikten i Ukraina slår hem och liv i spillror. Familjer slits isär och bristen på sjukvård, mat och vatten är akut. Röda Korset är på plats i Ukraina och vid gränserna. Som månadsgivare är du med och ger livsviktig hjälp till människor som drabbas. Bli månadsgivare idag och hjälp oss rädda fler liv i kriser och konflikter.
Britain's incredible landscapes were the inspiration for some of our greatest female writers. From Beatrix Potter's idyllic Lake District to the rugged Cornwall of Daphne du Maurier and the rolling chalklands of Jane Austen's Hampshire. I'm Mariella Frostrup and my passion is books. Now I want to uncover the stories behind some truly classic novels and find out what made these great authors write the works they did. From forgotten walks to mysterious caves, I'll be discovering the hidden secrets of these landscapes that so moved our best-loved female writers to create their masterpieces. Oh my goodness, what have we got here? There'll be big revelations as I find diaries, letters and new evidence that show what these regions really meant to these authors. and why their stories couldn't have come from anywhere else. It's a journey that will reveal why our greatest novels weren't just written by their authors, but by the times and places they lived in. Today, I'm in Yorkshire, discovering how its iconic moors inspired the Brontes to write novels like Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights.
There's no other book in English literature where you can say this landscape and this book are connected to that extent.
Why huge wealth from the textile industry here led to a boom in jobs for governesses, and gave the Brontes great writing material.
Extraordinary extravaganza.
And how these three groundbreaking sisters confronted the harsh realities of Yorkshire life to push for real social change.
I'm getting this sense of like Hades, sounds like the underworld.
West Yorkshire, a place where traditional farmland and vast rolling moors sit cheek by jowl with industrial towns that have shaped the history of Britain. It was here, in the first part of the 19th century, that the world's most famous literary sisters were born, the Brontes. In their short lives, Charlotte, Emily and Anne wrote some of the best-loved books ever, including Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights. Together, these novels have sold millions of copies in over 60 languages. But in their lifetimes, they were mostly unrecognized, publishing under pseudonyms that obscured their true identities and gender as they fought for success in a male-dominated world. It's a struggle that defined one of my favorite literary characters, Jane Eyre.
Women feel just as men feel. They need exercise for their faculties and a field for their efforts. And it is narrow-minded in their more privileged fellow creatures to say that they ought to confine themselves to making puddings, to playing on the piano and embroidering bags. What I love about the Brontes is that you really feel the beginnings of feminist literature. All of their heroines are in one way or another pushing against conventional expectations.
I've come to Yorkshire to discover what role the people and places here really played in shaping the Bronte sisters' great works, and how this led to writing about subjects and themes that would still resonate with readers around the world nearly 200 years later. Here in their home village of Haworth, you can be in no doubt just what a legacy these sisters left behind and how much they're still loved.
Bronte's presence here in Haworth is still everywhere. Wherever you look, you'll see examples of their literary genius. Villette's coffee shop, Wuthering Arts, even the Wi-Fi in my guest house is Bronte 1-2.
But it's not here in Haworth that I want to start my journey. Over the fields behind the parsonage where their father worked as rector is the place that seems to have had the biggest effect on the sisters. The moors would be a constant inspiration and refuge throughout their lives. Emily, said to be the quietest of the sisters, particularly loved the dramatic landscape and the seclusion the moors offered. She drew on the moors the most to create the only novel she ever wrote, Wuthering Heights. The tale of a doomed love affair between the farmer's daughter Catherine and the orphan Heathcliff.
Wuthering Heights is the name of Mr. Heathcliff's dwelling. Pure, bracing ventilation they must have up there at all times. Indeed, one may guess the power of the north wind blowing over the edge by the excessive slant of a few stunted firs at the end of the house, and by a range of gaunt thorns, all stretching their limbs one way, as if craving arms of the sun.
Emily was particularly influenced by this harsh and desolate countryside. Her characters had to battle these unforgiving elements to survive. What I want to know first is why this part of Yorkshire looks this way. Helping me find the answer is Professor Chris Jackson.
There's something about moorland, because we think of it as this wild, desolate, natural.
landscape. But actually, it's wild and desolate because we made it that way, isn't it?
Exactly. I mean, it does feel very remote, and you can see how looking out across the landscape, this would inspire you to think of wild thoughts, but actually it has been strongly touched by human hand. There's evidence of burning thousands of years ago from people who were actually using the land for agriculture. Also, the fact there's very few trees here may suggest that trees can't grow here, but the trees that were here were logged and removed for industrial purposes. So it's a strange feeling that you are somewhere wild, but you're actually somewhere that's kind of been touched quite strongly by human time.
Without these man-made changes, this place would look very different, and we might never have had Wuthering Heights at all. In a way, it's the epitome of